Is this the end of Heavy D from Diesel Brothers?
Heavy D went from being a regular guy who loved motor engines in Utah to becoming super famous. In a tough entertainment world with shows like Street Outlaws and Fast and Loud, Heavy D also became really popular. He amazed viewers with his incredible and creative truck builds, but behind those awesome builds, a huge problem has been growing for years. That problem has hurt Heavy D badly, destroyed his business, taken away a lot of his money, and made him stop doing what he loves most. It's the reason Diesel Brothers was suddenly shut down. So, what really happened to Heavy D Sparks? Can he get back up and change his own story? Fans aren't even expecting this. Heavy D was born into a simple family in Salt Lake City, Utah. What the family didn't have in money, they had in hard work and toughness. This was because of his strict father, who was a United States Army veteran. The Army let Heavy D's father go because he had a brain tumor, and doctors said he only had a few weeks to live. Those weeks turned into years, and Heavy D's father kept fighting. But it wasn't easy. At some point, the family was living on the street because they didn't have any money to rent a house. Still, love was strong in their family, and even though his father was strict, he was caring and supportive. Growing up in that strict but loving home, Heavy D was a curious kid. And there was one thing that made him more curious than anything else: motor engines. This wasn't just a normal interest in engines like most kids have. Heavy D was obsessed with machines. When he was a teenager, all he needed was motor engines. He could spend hours just working on dirt bikes, four-wheelers, and trucks. He even liked working on engines more than sitting in a classroom. Classes were so boring to him that he said he learned more with a wrench in his hand than with a pen in a classroom. This was true. Heavy D was so into engines that he spent most of his time in high school studying car mechanics, welding, and building things. His parents also helped create his love for cars. After the Army let his dad go, Heavy D's father installed car stereos. This affected Heavy D, who was obsessed with cars. When his father was too sick to install car stereos, his mother took over. After he finished high school, Heavy D looked for work, and his friend Rich Eggett gave him a job. Rich owned an ATV and motorcycle rental business and hired Heavy D as the business's manager. Heavy D worked hard, and he learned everything he could from the business. However, school was still important. So, he started college when he was 21 years old. His dad taught him to be determined and strong, and Heavy D was forever thankful for that. Heavy D's father survived a stroke and still lived with a brain tumor. If his father could survive all that, what was college that he couldn't get through? But sadly, his father wasn't always there. After all the fighting with his health, Heavy D's father died when he was just 21. His father's death left a big, empty feeling inside Heavy D. But despite that emptiness, Heavy D knew he had to keep going and be there for his family. He wanted to be more successful than ever. But he didn't think college would help him do that. Before, he didn't feel like he belonged, so why stay? After one semester of college, he left. His loss became a big turning point in his life, one that would shape the path he picked. Heavy D chose to work for his uncle. His uncle ran a construction company and worked at job sites all over Utah. Heavy D worked as a heavy equipment operator, and he felt more at home than he ever did during his short time in college. The work was hard, but Heavy D never complained, and soon he started to stand out. Unlike the other guys he worked with, Heavy D had big plans. He wasn't happy just collecting hourly pay. His goal was to be so much more, and he was always looking for chances to explore opportunities. Operating heavy equipment was already tiring, but this didn't stop Heavy D from working as director of marketing for Rich Eggett, who now owned a watch company named Rockwell Watches. Heavy D was inspired. He decided to bet on himself, and his goal was to open his own business and do the kind of projects he was passionate about. Heavy D wanted to take control of his life and fully explore what he could do.
Just a few years after he started working for his uncle,
Heavy D launched his own business. It was a digging business. He cleared lots, smoothed driveways, and moved dirt. Then his business got bigger. Heavy D started to build rock walls, waterfalls, and do other types of yard work jobs. Heavy D understood marketing, and he knew that if he wanted to grow, his work had to speak for itself. So, Heavy D threw himself completely into work, sometimes working for about 12 hours a day. He did such a great job that his customers started to tell other people about him, and jobs kept coming in for him. Still, this was far from Heavy D creating giant diesel engines. So, how did he go from a construction worker to creating huge machines? Heavy D is a religious man. He goes to and is an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS Church. He was part of the church's missionary work and served for 2 years in the Amazon area of Bolivia and Brazil when he was young. That missionary service made stronger what his father taught him about service, caring, and hard work. Heavy D kept going to church events, and it was during one of the many church events he went to that he met David Kiley, the man who would later be known as Diesel Dave. Dave and Heavy D shared the same love for religion, and they soon became best friends. When Heavy D started his digging company, he hired Dave to run and manage the equipment in 2008.
he also hired 2 other guys to help Dave out.
Heavy D kept running his digging company, but his love for motor engines kept getting stronger. Heavy D could no longer ignore it, and in 2009, shortly after he got married, Heavy D applied for and got his dealer license. Heavy D created a new company, Diesel Sellers, and opened a used car lot. He started to sell cars, but this wasn't what he planned to do all his life. Heavy D wanted to open a company where he would fix and customize vehicles. Slowly but surely, Heavy D went from selling cars to fixing them and eventually changing them. But he needed help if he was going to grow bigger. However, he had to hire the right people to help him out. The problem was, who could Heavy D trust? The first on his list was Diesel Dave. The two of them had the same interests.
They were both religious,
Loved anything that was connected to a mechanical engine, and they both loved huge trucks. It wasn't just their love of machines that made them work so well together. The two worked perfectly together in other areas too. Heavy D was the business guy with the crazy big dreams and the incredible marketing skills. Dave was the guy who brought the humor and the talent for putting on a show. Heavy D created the company Sparks Motors so he could build customized diesel trucks, make them unique, and eventually sell them for money. The two made crazy designs, testing how far their modified trucks could go and doing risky stunts. But they had an idea. The two could build their trucks and show the whole world how they worked. That way, they could entertain themselves and also market their trucks. This was the early years of YouTube, and the two decided to take their builds there. They created a channel and started to film the trucks they built. Their first tries were rough. The camera kept shaking and it was messy all over. But they were just starting and were just having fun. Despite the shakiness and roughness, there was one thing about their videos that stood out. They were real, genuine, and passionate. This realness and the kind of crazy stunts they pulled made the audience love them. How could the audience not like watching big trucks jumping over cars? They became one of the symbols of American truck culture. They gave people a show and were seen as the heroic underdogs doing amazing things. They provided the kind of raw entertainment and thrill the audience wanted, and in 2014, they took things to a different level.
They made a video of one of their trucks pulling a 10-ton trailer.
The video became an instant hit, and the two were on their way to becoming celebrities. The internet had already seen the rise of unlikely celebrities, skateboarders, pranksters, and vloggers, but mechanics who were also pranksters. That was new territory, and Heavy D and Dave were taking over. Heavy D was excited with the progress he was making, so he and Dave got even more daring with their builds. One of their builds that stood out and reached legendary status is the Mega Ram Runner 3. They showed it at the 2014 SEMA show and drew huge attention for its massive size and engineering brilliance. Till today, fans still talk about it as one of the most famous diesel builds ever shown at SEMA. What they didn't know was with each build like this, chaos was just around the corner.
Heavy D and Dave kept doing what they did.
But here's where things get interesting. They enjoyed what they did more than the money it gave them. This let them make some marketing decisions, which I'll tell you about later on. Because Heavy D focused on entertaining rather than the money side, he and Dave could take risky, creative decisions. One of them was a prank they pulled with a truck in 2016. They hooked the tailpipe of the truck into a bathroom and blew smoke into that bathroom. A friend of theirs was in the bathroom and the smoke blew over that friend. Heavy D and Dave found it funny, the internet found it funny, and Jay Leno found it funny too. Jay said it was the funniest prank he had ever seen, and using a truck for the prank made it even more unique. However, there was a group who didn't find it funny, and they are the reasons Heavy D got destroyed, and we'll get to them soon. Jay Leno invited them to his show, The Tonight Show, with Jay Leno. He had a segment he called Prank You Very Much. Like that, the two weren't just internet sensations anymore. They had become mainstream celebrities, but what they didn't know was they had barely started. After the show, Discovery called Heavy D. They wanted to make a show about him and Dave. Discovery already had experience with car shows and had tasted success with shows like Fast and Loud and Street Outlaws. Heavy D and Diesel Dave would be a breath of fresh air, a louder, riskier, and more high-stakes breath of fresh air. But maybe if Discovery knew how high stakes it would be, maybe they wouldn't have worked with Heavy D and Diesel Dave at all. The show was a huge success. The duo just built on what they already did on YouTube. They continued to turn ordinary diesel trucks into huge, unique builds and did crazy stunts. The audience found the chemistry between Heavy D and Dave exciting. The two joked around and pulled the audience in with their personal and conversational ways of talking to the audience. The audience enjoyed that the crew felt more like family than co-workers. Within months, Diesel Brothers was a breakout hit, but there was a big problem. Heavy D looked past the problem and kept doing what they did. As their popularity grew, Heavy D looked for new ways to market his companies. So he started to do promotional giveaways through diesel sellers. What Heavy D did was to give fans a chance to win custom trucks featured on the show. These giveaways were an amazing idea. It made the show more special. Viewers started to feel like they were part of the family. Imagine being able to not only watch a monster truck being built on national television, but also having the chance to own it. It even made Heavy D and Dave more popular. It helped take away some of the heat on them too, because they had started to struggle. In 2016, right when the show was starting, the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment, UPE, sued the Diesel Brothers for $118 million. They accused Diesel Brothers of repeatedly breaking federal law. If the Diesel Brothers were really breaking a law, why weren't they arrested? Did the police look the other way on purpose? The law UPE accused them of breaking was a pollution law. Supposedly, the black smoke from the trucks they modified was one of the most toxic types of pollution there is. UPE accused Diesel Brothers of poisoning the air and playing a role in the rise of asthma spikes and heart problems. The UPE weren't making baseless accusations. They had been investigating for a while. They gathered each video Heavy D and Dave uploaded as evidence against them. Then, for the cherry on top of their investigation, they bought a modified 2013 Ford F-250 for $43,000 from Heavy D. Afterwards, they sent the truck for an independent test. The test results showed that truck produced 36 times the pollutants and 21 times the particulate matter compared to a stock truck. This was a really bad result for Heavy D, and now he and Dave were in a big mess.
Do you think Heavy D is responsible for hurting the environment and making people sick?
Their fans didn't think so, and they rushed to Heavy D's defense. They enjoyed the show his show produced and wanted it to continue, and this quickly became a battle. Fans believed the UPE was trying to get the government to limit the freedom of truck lovers and kill the truck culture. The UPE believed they were doing the best thing for the environment and for people who were at risk of getting sick. Fans also thought UPE was trying to bully underdogs like Heavy D and Diesel Dave. Heavy D and Diesel Dave also didn't just sit quietly either. They said they never wanted to break any law and that their builds on the show were mostly for entertainment and not for everyday use. Does this mean that the Diesel Brothers show is staged? Are the giveaways fake? Because fans that win those cars would definitely drive them. Those close to Heavy D believed the case was a witch hunt. The court also heavily criticized UPE for seeking $118 million. In a case involving only 19 trucks and about 100 parts. What was supposed to be a show about big trucks had become a messy drama that slowly started to drain Heavy D, both mentally and with money. Then it got worse. In June 2018, an emissions inspector based in Davis County, Utah, gave a crushing testimony against Diesel Brothers. He revealed that a Diesel Brothers truck had been illegally modified. The judge that heard the testimony ordered that Heavy D and Dave should never make any similar modifications in the future. The Diesel Brothers were devastated, but they weren't changing their stance. Heavy D insisted that he was modifying trucks only for off-road use. He said he was under the impression that it was legal and claimed he was working with the Environmental Protection Agency to make sure he followed the rules. He even offered to clean up the air in the Wasatch Front and repair low-income folks' emissions for free. The UPE was not ready to compromise, and in March 2020, they got what they wanted. The court fined Heavy D and his associates $850,000. The court said Heavy D had broken the law hundreds of times. Heavy D was shocked. That was a lot of money, and he wasn't going to just give up the fight. So in April 2020, he appealed. But by 2021, Heavy D and his associates lost the appeal, and the court asked them to pay around $930,000 in legal fees. The case took around 6 years, and it had cost Heavy D close to $2 million. But that wasn't the only thing it cost Heavy D. Suddenly, Diesel Dave and Heavy D weren't just the fun-loving prankster mechanics. They had become the faces of a national conversation about climate, cars, and freedom. For the executives at Discovery, that spotlight was too hot to handle. They weren't so confident about giving the Diesel Brothers a platform anymore. The fans, too, noticed a change. The Diesel Brothers builds weren't as crazy as they used to be. Heavy D had to be working with Discovery's legal teams constantly. The legal team watched each episode before it was aired to avoid emissions violations. This was why the episodes felt different. The brothers weren't allowed to be as creative as they could be. In 2021, an episode had to be thrown out because it showed an exhaust modification which looked illegal. They weren't sure it was, but that doubt was enough. In 2023, Heavy D didn't have it in him anymore. He told Discovery he and his guys were done, and they chose to leave just like that. One lawsuit, and everything Heavy D built came crashing down. Will this be the end of him? Heavy D is from a family where being strong is their motto. It was supposed to crush him completely, but over the years, Heavy D has gotten assets to protect him. He also is still popular, so Heavy D and his crew return to YouTube full-time. There they can be free, following their own creative directions and engage the audience, all while obeying the law. Will that last for long?